Hi guys, how are we doing? It is nearly Halloween, it is the start of October, or at least it is when I'm filming this, and I thought it would be a perfect time to show you my Halloween book recommendations. Some of these may have been featured last year. I'm not too sure, I don't think so, but maybe. But these are my favourite, like, scary, but also Halloween-fitting books that maybe aren't too scary for some of you that like Halloween, but maybe don't like to be too freaked out. So I've got a bit of a mix for you today. I've got my top 10, because everyone likes a top 10, and I guess I'm just gonna get started. We are gonna go from one of my latest reads first, and that is City of Ghost by Victoria Schwab. This is actually one of the first books I've read by her that I can remember, I think so, and I really enjoyed it. It's set in Edinburgh. It's about a girl called Cass, who is, so she died basically a while back, and it was like a really bad accident. She only died for a second and then she was brought back to life. But in that moment, she developed the ability to cross between worlds. So to go into the land of the dead from the land of the living for like a little bit of time and see ghosts. And as such, she has a best friend who is a ghost, but he mainly stays in the living world and just follows around a little bit like an imaginary friend. Anyway, so her parents are like ghost hunters, I suppose you could say, or people who are really interested in ghosts and if they're real, and more of like the academic side of ghosts, I guess. And they get the opportunity to have their own ghost show. And so they all travel off to Edinburgh. Cass goes with them, and by the way, they have no idea that Cass can really see ghosts. So it's quite funny seeing that sort of difference between like, can you see ghosts? Or she can really see ghosts and she knows her parents can't, and she's like laughing at all of these things that her parents think they can see. Anyway, Cass doesn't necessarily adore this whole ghost side of herself, so going to Edinburgh is quite scary for her because she knows she's going to be able to feel lots of ghosts because it's one of the most haunted cities in the world. Anyway, that sounds pretty scary because the whole book is based in ghosts. It's not that scary. It's more of like a YA, it felt to me like a YA contemporary with elements of the Halloween-y, if that kind of makes sense, with elements of the ghoulish and the ghostly while still being a bit of contemporary YA. It was a fine, easy read. It is about 300 pages. I quite enjoyed it. For like one of my first books that I've read by Victoria, I was intrigued because I've heard she's amazing. I only gave this like a 3.5 out of 5. It was good, and I would recommend it for Halloween, but it's not, I mean, on spook factor, it's probably only like a 2. It's not gonna scare you, but it has a Halloween feel to it and it's good to read in autumn. So as much as I'm making that sound beige, it's actually really enjoyable, but just don't go for it looking for the scary, go for it looking for the like autumn creep factor, and you'll really love it. Okay, so that's number 1 on my 10 Halloween recommendations. The next one we're going for is Say Her Name by Juno Dawson. I read this last week, so it's quite fresh in my mind. I liked this because it's jumping on the back of that tale of Bloody Mary, and I don't know if anybody has ever done this or they like stayed over at friends and did this, but basically the premise is that you go up to a mirror in the middle of the night and you write in the mirror Bloody Mary, and then you say her name 5 times and she's supposed to come to you and kill you. So this is like one of those things that girls dare each other to do on the regular, or at least my girlfriends did in the UK. I don't know if it's anywhere else, but anyway, Bloody Mary, that's a thing. So this book is about a bunch of girls and guys who play Bloody Mary on Halloween night because they think it's a fun, scary thing to do, and they're at boarding school, and it turns out that, well, you get the drift. It turns out that Bloody Mary is actually a thing in this school, and it's so pursues the next 5 days waiting for Bloody Mary to come and get them. There are some pretty scary moments in this, however, because I have a pretty high threshold for horror in books, I didn't find it really scared me. Like, it takes a lot for a book to really, really scare me, but I do know a lot of people who've read this book where it's genuinely scared them. There's a lot of images of, if you've ever seen The Ring, so there's a lot of things of like a girl soaking wet, hair bedraggled, crawling out of things, up through baths, trying to drag you down with her. There are lots of really scary images there. I just don't think I was reading this in the right mind frame, because I was reading this on the way to work in the morning or at lunchtime in a canteen. So it's not the best place to be really getting into this, but I imagine if I was reading this on my own at night at like midnight, I would be pretty scared. So this is definitely one of my recommendations. I thoroughly enjoyed this book, and I posted it on Instagram yesterday, and there is a lot of you who really enjoyed this book. So feel pretty confident in recommending this as one of my top Halloween reads. Also, first book I've read by Juno Dawson. I feel it's very different apparently to her other books, but I have heard her other books are amazing, so like definitely gonna be checking out more Juno Dawson. Next one is so good. So I read this book, actually I've still got 20 pages to go and I'm gonna finish it right after this video, and that is The Corset by Laura Purcell. So this is the same author who wrote The Silent Companions, guys. You know how much I adored The Silent Companions. I've talked about it so much, and I think I first read The Silent Companions this time last year. I'm pretty sure I recommended it for Halloween. The Corset is not a disappointment in any way. In fact, it might be verging on better than The Silent Companions. So The Corset is, again, it's very gothic fiction. It's set in Victorian era, and it's about a girl who lives in a really poor, destitute family. They have no money, no food. They're just struggling to get along. And she is gifted for sewing. And as we start the book, it's basically a girl who has been sentenced to death for murder and a very rich woman who's coming to visit her to try and, well, okay, so the rich woman, Ruth, she is really, really interested in, sorry, it's not Ruth, it's Dorothea. So Dorothea is really interested in phrenology. I actually really love phrenology, or I'm very interested in the practice of phrenology from years ago. Not that I think it has any basis in science, obviously, but long story short, I won't go into it too much now, but phrenology is the idea that the measurements of your skull and the shapes of your cranium suggests or has a big part to play in whether you are criminal or whether you are particularly moral, or the different parts of your personality are dictated by the shapes of your skull, and the idea is that how much parts of your brain have grown based on how much you've used them. So if you're particularly moral, the moral part of your brain will grow out and it'll be visible in your skull. So the idea with phrenology is that you can measure someone's skull to find out if they're more likely to be a criminal. Quite interesting, one of those typical Victorian ideas, but anyway, so I love it. So Dorothea is one of those people who is really interested in phrenology. Ruth, however, is this poor girl who is really gifted at sewing that we find years later, and she is in a jail for women accused of killing somebody and sentenced to death. So it's similar to The Silent Companions in that we're seeing the story from two perspectives. We're seeing it from Dorothea, who is listening to Ruth, hearing about the stories, being told the full tale of her life, while at the same time only interested in measuring her skull because she's a criminal. And then you also see it from Ruth's perspective, the poor struggling girl who was driven to kill, basically. And the way she kills is absolutely phenomenal, and I really want you to discover this for yourself, because it's not a deliberate, you will understand. I mean, you're already obviously feeling sorry for this girl based on how I've depicted her, but I really don't want to go into too much about this book, because the way it unravels, Laura Purcell is phenomenal at unraveling the backbone of a story. So I don't want to take that away from you. I want to leave it to you. All I want to say is this is my top recommendation for Halloween. It's only just come out. It's really exciting. Go and buy it. Okay, so the next book is Nod. I've been recommending this for years, for about 2 years, I think. Nod is fantastic. It is about the 28 days that it takes for a world to descend into madness when the whole world loses the ability to sleep. It's phenomenal. And Adrian Barnes, his description of eyes in this is absolutely disgusting and amazing, and it's phenomenal how quickly a world can descend into anarchy when nobody is able to sleep. If you think how insane and awful you feel after 24 hours of not sleeping, imagine how that awful feeling can turn into madness after 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, when you realize you'll never be able to sleep again. This is a really interesting read, and just written really well and really scrumptiously. It's also worth saying that our lead in this book can still sleep, so you can imagine the jealousy that the rest of the population has to him. Next one is, I'm going to do this actually in tandem because they're both by Madeleine Roux. So we have Asylum and we have House of Furies. These two books really divided me in the sense that I love really scary horror, and these books should be really scary horror, and to a lot of people that I've discussed these books with, they've really found them really scary. So again, I have a really high threshold, so I don't want to judge these books based on how much they terrified me, because they might terrify you, and I can see how they could terrify you. So Asylum, I read this last year. I think I recommended it last year as well. This is basically about a guy who goes to summer camp, and the summer camp is based in an old mental asylum, and it seems that some of the old inhabitants of the mental asylum are gonna come back and make themselves known this year during summer camp. You can imagine the awfulness that comes to the forefront. This is actually really interesting because there is lots of mind games played, there's lots of notes that keep appearing, there's lots of images that keep appearing in this guy's head. He thinks he's going crazy, he's all alone, he's at summer camp, he barely knows the kids that he's with, he doesn't know if they're playing tricks on him. He finds secret passageways in this old asylum, lots of old photographs, really interesting. One point that I really don't like about both of Madeleine Rue's books is that, like, there's lots of images in the books, like each chapter has images, which I generally hate in books. I wish people didn't do it. Like, look at that. I don't want to see photographs. It just feels, I don't know, I don't like it. But if you like that sort of asylum thing, which I genuinely really like, and possession and all that sort of like really creepy, dark cellars, basements, like women jumping out of nowhere, you will love this book. It's exactly like a modern day horror film, just written down. So I would definitely recommend this one for a scary night, but definitely read it at night to make it a bit creepier, because I don't believe Madeleine Rue has that tension piece down yet. She is getting there, but I just don't feel like she really knows how to build the tension up. You're more likely to just jump into something scary rather than like be on the edge of your seat. And the same can be said for House of Furies, although House of Furies it's more like gothic fiction again. It is scary, but this is about a girl who lives on the street, and someone says, oh, you know, come and work with me, come and work in the grand house that I work in. She goes with them, and it turns out that this house is not what it seems. It's ruled by a man who seems a lot like the devil, I'm gonna say, and it's a house of punishment. It's a house of furies. It's a house where the evil go to stay and they don't come out again. So there is again lots and lots and lots of room for the fear factor in this. And if you read it in the middle of the night, I'm sure it will be, but again, because I was reading it at a canteen, didn't really scare me. So, God, this is so beige. I really do recommend this for Halloween if you don't want to be too freaked out. Okay? So you like scary, but you don't like too scary, read this. One that I will recommend if you like to be really scared though is a book that you all know that I love, and that's Frozen Charlotte by Alex Bell. I'm going to recommend this at the same time as The Haunting by Alex Bell. So Frozen Charlotte is a little bit Victorian again. Anything scary is always Victorian. It must have been terrifying living in those times. But this is about a series of dolls that come back and enact revenge on anybody living in a house. I won't go into it more than that because I have recommended Frozen Charlotte a lot on here because I adore it. But this is the only book in this pile of books that actually, to the bone, terrified me. It really did. Frozen Charlotte and Charlotte Says, both of them really genuinely scary. I don't know if it's creepy dolls, small children singing in the dark, I don't know what it is. It's like, but Alex Bell has that tension, terrifying piece that Madeleine Rue doesn't have. She has that down to a T. She will have you, like literally, I had to stop reading, otherwise I wouldn't be able to go to bed, and I had to watch something happy on TV to calm myself down. That's how, like, creepy these books are. And then the same for The Haunting. This is not in the same series, it's again by Alex Bell, but this is about a girl who goes back to live in her grandma's house, just to stay there for a little while, and there is a dark presence, which is watching the house and the rooms, and it's taking out its wrath on one of the girls who is squatting in the house, and it is a fabulous, fabulous scary read with a maritime twist on it, which I quite liked because there's not a lot of books that you read with that like history in the maritime. and ships and that sort of thing, so I really enjoyed this for that. So I would definitely recommend this one. In fact, anything that you can find by Alex Bell, just phenomenal for Halloween. I would also recommend the Hazelwood. Won't go into this too much, but this is definitely not too scary, but there's creepy elements. It's like a fantasy world veering on the creepy. I have done a full book review of the Hazelwood though, so do check that out if you want to know more about this. And then a classic, because I felt I had to do a classic, is Anthony Burgess' A Clockwork Orange, which scares you in the sense that it's dystopian and oh my god, if this was a real thing, that's terrifying. But I would definitely recommend A Clockwork Orange because it's not that long. If you haven't read it yet, you really should. I don't often say that about classics, but I think this is beautiful just because of the way that Burgess creates his own language. Let me try and find some of the words. If you haven't read A Clockwork Orange before, you may or may not know what I mean. You may have watched the movie. Actually, I would also say that if you've watched the movie and you got put off the book because of the movie, do check it out because I hated the movie, yet adored the book. So, to be honest, I really just don't think it's a very good movie, actually. So anyway, these are my top 10 recommended Halloween-y reads. I hope you really enjoy them. Definitely check them out. Let me know if you have any more. Not Stephen King. Like, I've been recommended so many Stephen King recently because people keep telling me if you want to be scared, because I really do want to be scared, I want something genuinely terrifying, then read Stephen King. But the books are so long and I do not have the time to commit to such big books right now. I'm looking for something around 300 pages maximum. So if you have anything around that, let me know. Put it down below, I will check it out. Otherwise, have really, really great, like, Halloweens, guys. And I will speak to you soon. Bye.